Welcome to CAE Pilot Podcast, a podcast that brings together aviation professionals to discuss life as a pilot, training, and career advice. You can find us at cae.com/CAE Pilot-podcast or subscribe to our show on your audio podcasting platform of choice. You can also find our video podcast on our YouTube channel.
Today we're thrilled to have Ian Houseman and Vladimir Geck from Elit'Avia join us. Elit'Avia is a private company and one of the largest operators of Global 6000 business jets. They are Argus Platinum and ISBAO certified and have a growing fleet of aircraft in North and South America, including Global 6000 aircraft, and they're adding Gulfstream 450 and 650 to their fleet. They also have an A340 coming to their fleet in the very near future. They're a global operation, and maybe we'll get started, Ian, by you telling us a little bit more about Elit'Avia.
Thanks, Patrick.
We're so happy to have you here, and maybe we should start. Elit'Avia is a well-established business aviation company, and maybe, Ian, you can tell us a little bit about Elit'Avia.
So Elit'Avia is a business aviation company. We manage clients' aircraft and we charter aircraft as well. The business has two AOCs, one in Malta and one in Slovenia. We have bases around the globe. We are flying 24/7 on every continent. And we haven't really noticed much difference over the COVID period anyway. People need to fly, and they've turned to business aviation for that as a source of meeting that requirement. The company's had a long association with CAE. We've just re-signed a contract going to the end of 2021. And we've always had a fantastic experience with the account managers, and Vladimir will probably be able to tell you more on that.
And I, just in my research, I know that our relationship goes back a full decade, which is, and obviously we're thrilled to have Elit'Avia as customers of CAE. You touched on it before, Ian, that the COVID period has really, it's air travel has, if not stopped on the commercial side, it's certainly been curtailed. Tell us a little bit about, maybe a bit more in depth about what you've seen on the business aviation side.
Well, I think if we step back a little bit before that, the whole COVID situation is predicated on instability that was already existing. So we were still in the process of, whether people realize it or not, we're in the process of recovering from the 2008 financial crisis. There's generalized political instability across the world, and there are other issues with those structures. And COVID really took hold where SARS didn't, and was able to spread quickly. So from a business aviation perspective, we saw people taking advantage of the fact that we could fly from specific locations and not hubs. We were able to implement better or more tailored solutions for protection of the passengers, and that, from our perspective, doesn't just start when the client or the potential charter wants to fly. It starts way before that, with questions about their travel history. We talk with our suppliers to see what they provide from a COVID security point of view. So it's made it more complex, especially for positioning of staff. And that's something that goes on in the background, and we use the normal conventional airlines for that. You've seen changes really across aviation conventionally, from the busiest airports in the world becoming the quietest, and some of the quietest, like Anchorage, becoming the busiest.
Which is, I mean, it's really funny, in a lot of ways.
But there's structural elements behind that make it even more complex, because a small airport becoming the busiest in the world suddenly has a lack of hotel space. There's catering challenges. There's all sorts of other challenges that go on in the background. But from a business aviation point of view, we've seen a significant change in the profile of how we fly, where we fly, and the amount of flying we're doing.
So would you say then that business has picked up? Are you seeing a different type of customer? What does that change look like?
In some areas has definitely changed. We're doing a lot of ultra long haul from a charter perspective. On the other side, clients who we manage the business aircraft for, some have chosen not to fly, which the issues with flying across certain countries at the very start was reasonably simple. The restrictions on flying were accepted globally. They were pretty generic. Everybody understood what they meant. Now we're into a different phase where we're in this kind of dip between countries having the first phase of COVID and maybe the second or even third. Some countries are still struggling with the first. And they're taking localized action because generic action just isn't working, both politically and economically. So we're seeing the complexity of operations becoming affected by short-term changes that are either political or economic. They're affected by the nationalities of passengers flying from one state to another. They're affected by supply chain, which we're now starting to see the effects of. So maintenance in some cases is taking longer, or suppliers of other facilities or services that we need are having to plan more. And conversely, we're still getting last-minute requests to move quickly, which is very challenging to achieve.
Knowing business aviation, there always seems to be a way to get it done, and I would imagine that your team is finding a way to make things happen.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word team, because it's not just the team in the business, it's the team outside. All the suppliers, even the clients to some extent, understand that things are very challenging and are willing to work with us. Our pilots and crew have been incredible. There isn't really a moment where I can say that we've had a challenge with teamwork. It's probably brought everybody closer together, including suppliers of services. Certainly, what we've seen with CAE and continuing training has been exceptional.
What I find interesting is that what you're describing, I think, is what people are seeing in everyday life too. Here in Canada, we're seeing the border with the U.S. closed, which I don't know that it's happened in history. And they've just extended that. At the same time, we're seeing Europe opening up. But even when we go to the grocery stores, or the shelves are don't have things that we typically have. So it's interesting, as I've spoken to people throughout aviation, how closely it's reflected in a lot of ways what's happening in society in general. So I think it's one of those times where everybody's sort of going through it together, and I think there's an understanding of what's happening. And it sounds like you're seeing that from not only a supplier side, but from a customer side as well. The idea that we're all in it together, I guess, is what I'm.
Yeah, I think the challenge we all have is we kind of forget we're all individuals and we have families, and our suppliers have the same. They're all going through this as an individual, but also in a team. We can see the economic impact on some of the strategic businesses out there, which is very concerning and unsettling for everyone. But we also understand what that means. That means they're having to take quite difficult decisions to get through what is by no means a health crisis that's anywhere near over. The problem we have now is it's not just a health crisis, it's a political, it's an economic, it's a sociological process we have to go through.
And I think the word unprecedented is maybe overused, but I think it's the one that we keep coming back to. I don't think we've ever seen, even if you go back to 9/11 or 2008, certainly in aviation, that we've never seen anything like this.
I think the challenge globally is we haven't seen anything that's affected all sectors at the same time.
Right.
So, just as you think you've got one thing fixed, there's another problem.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some pretty hard thinking to understand how we move forward. There is no quick solution.
Yeah, and I think that's what everybody is starting to realize, especially as you see reopenings and the increase in cases, et cetera, is that moving quickly in this case, it's got to be very calculated and smart in terms of how we proceed. People might be interested to know that your background is really, I believe, as a firefighter. Am I correct?
Yeah, I spent 32 years. I know it's hard to believe. 32 years in the fire service. I spent the last 30 years in management, the last 15 in strategic management, so running service and services. Within that, my background led me into working in the counter-terrorism field, and I ran that team for the southeast of England for 10 years. And also commercially, I set up one of the first public service commercial companies for protection of infrastructure in the UK. So it's been a varied background, and all whilst going out and being a gold commander at the senior level on big incidents.
So it sounds to me like this is the moment that you've almost been preparing for your entire life.
I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. You mentioned your team, obviously, and I wanted to ask how did you prepare your team for this? How do you continue to prepare your team? Was there any special training? What are the measures you're taking for the team to make sure that your operation remains safe, both operationally and from, I guess, a health and safety perspective? There's
a couple of different elements around the team. Obviously, we've got the teams in the offices, and then we've got the teams, both pilots and crew. So one of our approaches is don't overload people with information. I know that's easy to say, but information flow is one of the critical things that allows people to accept change. If you have an incremental approach to management of information and changing the way that you do things incrementally, it's not something that people will resist, as opposed to a big change. Having said that, at our offices, we're still working remotely, so the offices have only essential personnel there at this point. We have quite a strong infection control process. We've limited all travel to non-essential. For non-essential travel, that's stopped. Yeah, we're using Zoom, Teams, you name it. We're using every IT system we can to hold meetings, and we do that on a daily basis. From the crew perspective, we have a similar approach. We build this safety bubble around them, so we check the suppliers and the routes that they're going to make sure that their COVID security is robust. We track who the crew fly with, who the crew transfer from hotel to airport with. We check the airports. We're doing testing on the crew on a regular basis, and we collectively review that every 48 hours. So where we were, let's say in February, has changed to where we are now, and it will continue to change because we had some meetings this week just to talk about the public perception that this is getting back to normal, and it is not getting back to normal. There are certainly still challenges with positioning staff. We've just started operations in the US and South America, so there's some challenges there. We work in Africa regularly. We work in Asia, Russia, so we're all over the globe, and the challenge we have is every single part of the globe is in a different place with COVID.
You're going into the hotbeds when you talk about, unfortunately, the U.S. right now, certain parts of the U.S., and of course, South America have been particularly hard hit.
Yeah.
Which must pose some interesting challenges.
It does. I think on the surface, there's a picture that things are worse in certain areas than they actually are. My background helps interpret some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some connections that are able to help me. And this is one of the things that we are very strong on. We have big personal networks. So we're able to ring people and ask them, what is it actually like there? What are the numbers saying to you?
Right.
So we're able to get that ground truth, which is extremely valuable. And this is where I think we're able to be very flexible.
Mm.
But it takes some work.
Yeah, I think unfiltered information is, especially in this day and age, is an important thing to have access to. Definitely.
Well, I think unfiltered, but also you need to validate where the information is coming from, and that's one of the things that you learn, certainly from a command point of view, where you're dealing with long communication chains. You have to validate where the information came from. Is it a trusted source? When was it given? Is it 5 minutes old or 4 hours old?
Right.
And then you need to assess how long is that timeline chain, and decide, based on other information that you may have validated, if that is even credible now.
And in a fast-moving situation, as you say, what was true even an hour ago sometimes is no longer. Yeah. Maybe we'll switch gears and we'll see, because Vladimir's been sitting patiently in his beautiful location there in Croatia that we're all very jealous of. And Vlad is I believe he still flies, and he's your head of training, if I'm not mistaken. So Vlad, maybe we'll turn to you, and you can tell us maybe a little bit about your career path and how you ended up at Elit'Avia.
That's basically easy. Since I was a kid, I was looking to the sky. In my hometown, there was a small flying club, which I was visiting quite often by my bicycle as well. So at the age of 16, I joined the course starting flying gliders, and since then the path was just straightforward. I went to the University for Mechanical Engineering when I was doing the aviation studies. So after my degree, I joined the local national carrier airline, which I became first officer, starting with DC-9 and MD-80s. And since then, I was 24 years there, going from the very young first officer up to the being captain, TRI, TRE, and later on fleet chief instructor there. After a while of this training involvement, I realized that it's time for me to change the environment from the airline to something more challenging for me. I decided to go definitely for the global airplane, which is global, it's not local. And with that, the Bombardier Global was the only solution for me. So I picked up the training at CAE with the help of Elit'Avia. I finished my type rating, and after some freelance work around and another company, I was offered the job of head of training in Elit'Avia. So I accepted the job, but the thing was that I was not prepared for the job. It was quite some time before I was able to be responsible for what I was responsible. So after that, the path was easy. At a certain moment, we managed 3 AOCs of Elit'Avia, and on all 3 AOCs, I was head of training, nominated person for the training. And all the time since very beginning, in 2007, when I was actually in a business aviation, first time visiting CAE, we are always connected basically more and more to the CAE. I was doing some training before, but I was still in airline as a TRI and TRE in some CAE facilities. One of that to be mentioned is Madrid, but it was a commercial part, not business aviation part. So basically since 2013, I was related only to the CAE business aviation training. I was first really surprised since the training was amazingly good and tailored. While I was responsible then for the other crews to be trained properly, in time, and to finish on time, it was not easy actually to follow all this. At a certain moment, I realized that we have a reliable partner. CAE is a really reliable partner. Plenty of responsible people in CAE actually became my friends. We can talk 24/7 whenever something is needed. And I believe that the team at CAE is really amazing. They have a passion for this part of the job. All instructors, they love being instructors. They love being there. So they have enough experience around, and I'm pretty happy that we are sharing this experience further to the pilots. Not only to Elit'Avia pilots, the rest of the business aviation pilots all over the world, whoever is joining the CAE training is always welcomed basically like coming back home.
And obviously that's our objective at CAE is to do just what you're describing. So we're very happy to hear that your experience is as good as you describe it. Tell me about the training in terms of what you've done with your pilots in terms of training for COVID, and how what you've had to do with your pilots since the beginning of the outbreak.
Since the beginning of the outbreak, we are continuously trying to keep the training as usual. We don't want to deviate from the training if it's not really necessary. We are keeping all the mandatory periodic trainings in place. The only thing is that there are plenty of last-minute changes due to travel restrictions, due to different country restrictions, due to different passports of the pilots, due to different previous travels of the pilots. We are always revising the last-minute things. As you know, CAE implemented plenty of rules for the trainees visiting the training centers of CAE. Each training center has a different rules in place. The rules are changing daily. Measures taken are at some places more restrictive and some other less restrictive. But basically, before the pilots start training, we cannot be sure that they will start training. However, till now, we were really lucky. We've been able, with some rescheduling, to basically bring all the pilots to the dedicated training centers, and we did the trainings quite regularly. I was recently in Amsterdam Training Center, end of April, the mid of the COVID outbreak. It was not easy to come there. Finally, I was able to reach Amsterdam with a little bit of delay, but the training was as professional as usual, with all the measures in place. It was not easy to do the training, sweating in the simulator for 4 hours with rubber hand gloves and a mask over the face. It's not what the pilots are used to. Definitely not. But again, if we understand why these measures are in place, then we have to adapt. And we are daily adapting. So traveling around the world, you can see daily restrictions imposed by certain governments which are changing. Today you come to one country, tomorrow you are coming back, the measures are different. So you have to be sure that you are informed correctly, that you follow the rules for, let's say, personal safety and for the safety culture of Elit'Avia as well. As well, to respect the restrictions at CAE, we're doing this for our personal safety and for the safety of the personnel there.
And getting more into the operation, how has the job of a pilot, or how has being a pilot changed since the beginning of COVID in terms of measures that are required? Whether it be at the airport, on a layover, in flight.
Again, this answer can be easily explained in comparison to the normal human being visiting the shop. It's not the same experience anymore. If you go shopping, you have to use some protection, gloves, hand sanitizing, masks, social distancing, all these places. The same restrictions applies as well for us. The thing is that some places are more restrictive, some are less, but basically all over the world there are restrictions. Going from the airport to the hotel, you have basically no chance anymore to go to the restaurant. You have to order food to your room. Some hotels even don't have the room services anymore. You have to order the food from delivery companies. It's challenging. But so far it was, let's say, acceptable, as we all accepted the new challenges. We are actually doing what we need to do to stay safe, to keep the business running, not to jeopardize what is our goal, to bring the safe customers to the safe destinations as safe as possible. So meeting our clients at the airport building, in front of the aircraft, wherever, all the restrictions, like every normal person is experiencing during the day, all the restrictions are there. So from taking the temperature from the passengers, not shaking the hands, social distancing to them. So as long as we are in a contact with anyone who is not the original crew, we have to keep the full social distancing. Even between the crew, though we live as a family together while we are on duty. This is a little bit different. It's not that easy, but still, we have to be sure that everyone is safe.
Yeah, and I think that it's a matter of, it's not natural for any of us to be going through this, especially a crew who is it's all about togetherness, working together as a team that close, and with customers where you expect to, I think in business aviation especially, there's a certain level of service that's expected, and that has certainly changed. Not the level of service has changed, but the way the service is delivered has certainly changed. Vlad, there was one last question I wanted to ask you, and it's one that I've asked a lot of people, a lot of the pilots that we've had on the podcast, and that is, there's a lot of pilots who are either not working right now, or who are younger, aspiring pilots who are in flying schools, and they're looking at the economic environment and they're looking at what's happening, but they still have a passion for flying. What would you suggest to these people right now who are sort of seeing their dreams either put on pause or are wondering if they should continue? What would you say to them?
I might start a little bit differently that you expected now. So I was given the quote by the Indian Sadhguru from my wife today, and I will give you his quote for these challenging times today. He said, "Challenging times are an opportunity for individuals and the nations to rise above their comfort zones and enhance life." This can be as well for the pilots. Everyone has been living in the past in the comfort zone. So being pilot in a really, really good progressing airline, the job was safe. No one was thinking even about to be fired. Now the time has changed. Definitely what I would suggest the pilots, keep looking, don't give up. You have to continue. The world sooner or later will need more pilots, definitely. I'm in aviation, let's say professional part of the aviation, a little bit more than 30 years now. In all these years, I've been through different ups and downs, definitely. But like it is now, I believe it was never before. But again, there will be path up again. Sooner or later, the business will be growing. And at that moment, the pilots will be needed. But if the pilots will be desperate, doing different things to survive, some pilots will be definitely lost for the community. But on the other hand, I can say that 80% or even more of the pilots live their dream, because they're pilots because of the dreams from the childhood. If they can continue dreaming, they will get a job back sooner or later.
And I think very inspiring words. Appreciate that, Vlad. Finally, Ian, any final thoughts from you before we sign off?
Well, I just echo Vladimir's approach there. It's really unprecedented. We use the word time, where people are very uncertain about what's going to happen. One of the more famous speakers, a guy called Zig Ziglar, coined the phrase that fear is false evidence appearing real. The problem we have with fear at the moment is there's plenty of evidence out there on media and social media channels to say that it's real. I would also point to 2008, where we had a massive financial crisis. The early 90s, where we had another crisis. The early 70s, where we had another crisis. And if you look at where the big businesses of today are, they were formed in them periods. I think from the original start of the stock market, I saw some estimation that 90% of the biggest businesses no longer exist because they don't reflect the environment they're in, and they've changed. So I would say exactly the same as Vladimir. You just got to keep pushing. You got to keep dreaming. You got to keep faith that it's going to turn around, because it will if you put the effort in to make it happen. But back to the word teamwork and partnership, we just can't get through this without those structures. And I would finish with just a word to the team and all our suppliers and partners like yourselves. We're lucky to have those people in our business and supporting us. We can't probably articulate the gratitude that we feel towards them as team members and partners, but we know that if we work together, we'll get through this, and hopefully we'll see some of those pilots and other colleagues who are looking to stay in aviation join us.
Well, listen, we're lucky to have to count Elit'Avia amongst our customers. It certainly sounds like you have a wonderful team there, and that you're doing everything to ensure the safety of your employees, your customers, and I think everyone who flies with you can have a lot of confidence that you're doing the right things. Thank you so much for joining us on the CAE Pilot Podcast. We wish you well, and hopefully we'll have the chance to talk again.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
CAE Pilot Podcast is brought to you by CAE, the global leader in training for the civil aviation, defense and security, and healthcare markets. For more information, check out cae.com.